All right, so this is the Korg Minilogue Polyphonic Analog Synthesizer, and there are already a lot of videos on YouTube showing what this thing can do and walking through basic parameters and just the architecture of the synth. I'm not going to do that in this video. If you want to, see someone go through what each knob does, there's plenty of videos for that. I'm going to assume a basic understanding of how an analog synthesizer works, so I'm not going to waste any time explaining that stuff. But what I'm going to do is try to answer some questions that friends of mine have had about the synth, either on Muffwiggler or other forums or the Atlanta Synthesizer Club Facebook group. Some friends there have asked me. I think I'm the only one in the club that has one. So anyway, what I'm going to do is open up an initial basic patch and just do some examples of some of the features of this synth that people were curious about. And then I'm going to just play a couple patches that I've made, including this one, to give you an idea of what I've been doing with the synth. I've only had it for a day, so I don't know everything about it yet, but we're getting along pretty well. So this first patch is I'm sequencing externally with the Zaquencer, which, if you're not familiar, it's Zac Audio made an alternative firmware for the BCR 2000 Behringer MIDI controller. So I'm using that sequencer to sequence the Minilogue, and then I've got motion sequencing going on the Minilogue itself. So the pitches are coming from the Zaquencer, but there's a bunch of automation going on from the motion sequencing, which I really think is one of the best features of this synth. It really makes up for the only having one LFO and having it be kind of a limited LFO. And as you can see, it's clocked to the master clock from the incoming MIDI. So basically you get 4 lanes of synced automation that can be smooth or stepped. So that's a lot to work with, and I think it helps add to the complexity of this patch. So I also have some external effects, but I'll take them out really quick and you can hear. So this is just the Minilogue. Yeah. Okay. So let's get started with a basic patch. So when you go to the initial program, it's a preset. So it's actually the initial programs aren't going to be what you see is what you get. It's saved like an initial preset. So I always like to override that, and there's a great just button combo for doing that. So if you hit Shift and play, that loads whatever's on the panel. Another really nice shortcut is if you hit Shift and record, it tunes. And again, since this is an analog polysynth with VCOs, it's not always in tune. When I first got it, it had been on the truck, I assume, so it was pretty cold and it was a little wonky, but it's been pretty solid every time I've used it since then. And it just it warms up when you initially turn it on, and then if it seems a little off, let's see. So that sounds pretty good. If it's a little off, the calibration between the voices, you can just hit Shift and record, and it will tune for you, and it's perfect. So no need to do any complex calibration procedures. It's pretty great. All right, so one thing I was going to do is just do some filter sweeps, really slow, with varying levels of resonance, and I'll do it first in mono mode and then in poly, so you can hear the difference. So. And I'll do it with a little bit of the sub oscillator and with the second oscillator detuned slightly, which is a sawtooth. So as you probably know by now, all the different voice modes have a different parameter that can be adjusted with this voice mode depth. And in mono, that's a sub. In unison, it's detune from the various voices, like a spread. And then in poly, it changes chords and etc. In duo, it's detune as well. So add in a little of this sub. And the second oscillator. Alright, that sounds pretty good. So take the filter envelope out. So, yeah, here's just some basic sweeps of that sound. This is with no resonance in the 4-pole mode. About a quarter of the way up. It's a little quiet. I'm going to turn it up on the mixer. Sorry about that. A little more resonance. About halfway up. Just shy of halfway. That's where you start to hear it. Just over half. Three quarters. And all the way. So as you can hear, it's not exactly steppy, but there's a weird kind of warbly sound at high resonance. It sounds kind of cool to me, but people who know more about filters might tell you that it's not good. I don't know. But it is what it is. You can make up your own mind. So then I'll just really a little faster do the 2-pole. So this is no resonance. Three quarters, or sorry, a little over a quarter. %. Three quarters. And all the way. Now we're going to do it in 4-pole mode in Poly. So the raw sound. And so it's a little easier on my hands. I'm going to just sequence a held chord. All right. So this is going to be the chord. So we're in 4-pole with no resonance. Over a quarter, about a third. Okay. Just over 50%. And 100%. All right, and now what I'm going to do, a few people had asked me about the filter self-oscillating, using it as an oscillator with the key tracking up. So I turned the oscillators off in the mixer, got my resonance up, and we're going to do a little of that. So I found that the tuning of oscillator really depends on where you have the cutoff. That's kind of like your coarse tune, and that'll affect the tracking. So So you hear there at the 4th octave it starts to go. You might be able to fine tune that a little better, but that's pretty musically useful, I feel like. So I'll play around with it a little bit and you can hear it. Here's a 2-pole. When you go higher up in the octaves, it starts to get a little wacky. and you can FM it from the LFO, which just goes just up into audio rate. You can't control the pitch of the LFO from the keyboard or the sequencer. You can with that envelope, but it doesn't track pitch, but you can get it into audio rate for like a static FM. And in 4-pole. And here with a little bit of the noise added in. Yeah, so some pretty weird sounds. All right, now I'm gonna show you how to do a latch on the arpeggiator, which is something that a few people have said you can't do. It's not officially called that, and it's a little, you kind of have to, it's a roundabout way to do it. I wish there was just like a shift command. I wonder if that's something they could update in the firmware. I think it would be a really good update if they could do just a hold, so it could drone and keep the VCA open, and then also a latch for the arpeggiator. So maybe that could be like a shift command of some kind. But for right now, there is a way to do it. So if we go here and get a more normal sound. BPM way down, so let me turn that up a little bit. So there's the arpeggiator, but of course when I release the key it stops playing, which is annoying. So instead, if we go and make a sequence with the arpeggiator, I'll just do it all with that one chord right now. So I have the sequence length set to 1 step. If I wanted to have more steps, I could do variations in the arpeggiator, or have different chords sequenced, etc. But for right now, this works. And the step resolution is going to affect how much the arpeggiator we can hear. So, because there the steps are shorter, it can't play the whole arpeggio. I initially had it in this mode, so I thought it wouldn't latch correctly, but if you open it up, now that gets a full step, and it can play the whole arpeggio. And then you can adjust the voice mode, because the notes from the arpeggio aren't actually in the sequencer. It's just the notes that you entered on the keyboard. So the pattern can be changed, which you can do poly. My favorite, random. And this way you can get latched random sequencing. So yeah, if you wanted to do a more intricate sequence, you could have different arpeggiator voice modes for each step. You could enter them in one at a time, or you could do motion sequencing and actually modulate the knob. So you could have random chords, forward, backwards, whatever, all within the same patch. So it's pretty versatile. That said, I would have liked just a really basic latch. I mean, you know, even the micro Korg had that. So it's a little, I don't know. I think it was an odd decision to not have that as a, you know, a front panel feature. But you can do it, and I think it works well. All right, and I'm still going to use that latched arpeggio to demonstrate another thing that someone had asked about. But this time I'm going to, just like when we were playing the filter, I'm going to keep the oscillator completely muted, and the latch is just going to keep the VCA open for the audio in and give a envelope for the filter when we want it. So again, a little, it's a bit of a limitation. There's no volume control for it at all. It's just full blast or not, which is pretty annoying. I mean, I guess they assume you have volume controls on whatever you're outputting, which, you know, it's okay. The other thing is, it's only audible when the keys are held down. And normally that wouldn't be a problem, but since there's no latch or hold, it's a little frustrating. That being said, there's ways to work around it, and I think it's worth it, because the really interesting thing about this, as someone pointed out, is because the Minilogue has a filter per voice, if you do key tracking and have a polyphonic patch going, even without the synth playing, you're going to get different resonant peaks for those different notes. And so when you bring in external audio, it's really interesting what happens. It's not like just running audio through one filter. You're running it through 4 filters, because the external audio goes through each voice. So I'll show you an example. This also, people were asking about integrating. This one's an obvious one, the Korg Volca sample. I think the Volca range is obviously, you know, what the sync ins and outs are really about. You can use it for other stuff too. I haven't messed with syncing the Minilogue to my modular yet. I'm going to experiment with that later, and I'll definitely do a video. But for right now, I've got the sync out from the Minilogue going into the Volca, or going into the Volca, And what's great on the Minilogue is you can easily, through the menu, set up the behavior of the sync, whether it's 8th notes or 16th notes, etc. So here, I'll give a quick demonstration of that. So here's the sound I've got coming in. And that sounds fine, right? We can filter it. Okay, that's cool. But this is where it gets interesting. A little reverb. So yeah, that's filtering external audio. All right, and a lot of people have been asking about the noise. In some of the demos that were originally posted to YouTube, there seemed to be a lot of line noise, and it wasn't clear where that was coming from. So as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty much just the sometimes delay. If you have like weird wave shaping going on, or obviously the white noise, or other cross mod or something, you can end up with sort of a noisy waveform sound, but there's not actually any unwanted noise in the normal signal path. But with the delay, as you turn up the time and the feedback, you will get some noise, and that just has to do with the type of delay emulation they've done. So for me, it means that I'm probably not going to use the delay as much for like really long long time, long feedback, or high feedback, long time delay sounds. But I have external effects for that, so it's still useful. I think it's cool. The fact that you can motion sequence the parameters means that I'm going to find room for it in some of my patches. But I'll give you an example so you can hear what I'm talking about. So, really basic poly sound. And as you can hear, there's no noise when the VCA opens up. There's nothing in the trail. And then as I turn up this delay feedback, I have it on the shortest time. So that doesn't really add any noise because it's such a short time, even at really high feedback. I mean, the delay is kind of itself a little lo-fi sounding, but there's not any distinct noise added. And then as I add more, you start to hear it coming in. And there it is, really audible. And at the longest time, I mean, it pretty much, it's as loud as the delayed signal itself. And there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, at that high feedback, long time, you're going to get that. And there's no filter on it. There's this high cut, obviously, but there's no low pass filter after the delay. So that's the sound of the delay. If you back the feedback off a little bit, I mean, you still kind of hear it. So really, just if you crank the time all the way, you're going to get noise. If you put it like in the middle, that's more tolerable. But, you know, as I said, that's the nature of the delay. So, all right. And somebody asked me for an example of a deep bass sound. And for me, coming from, you know, coming up, getting into electronic music with drum and bass, the first type of bass sound I make when I get a new synthesizer is a Reese. So here's my Reese Bass on a Korg Minilogue. There you go. All right, so this about wraps it up. What I'm going to do now is just give you my kind of final thoughts on the Minilogue after having it for 24 hours, sort of like a little mini review, and then I'm going to play a couple patches I've made with it, so you can get a bit more of an idea of the sounds you can get beyond what's already been put out there. So all in all, I'm really happy with it. I think it's a great synthesizer. For the price, I mean, there's just nothing like it. Even aside from the price, a polyphonic analog with this much, you know, knob per function, I actually really like the form factor. Obviously, the slim keys are not the best for players, for, you know, people who are much more coming from a piano or a keyboard player background. But they're better than mini keys, and they definitely get the job done. And honestly, if I had to choose between the current size and a full-size keyboard, I don't know. I think I would stick with this because I love the form factor. Everybody's going to have different opinions on that. I would rather have this than a JDXA. There's so many synths on the market right now that, you know, go for way more than this, that I think this crushes. Something like the Prophet 6 or like the Modal Electronics stuff, that's another story. I don't really know. But at that point, you're talking about like 5, 6, even more times the price. So, yeah, I definitely think Korg did it right with this one. And this is a synth that people are going to be playing and talking about for years to come. So, thanks for watching. And if you have any questions or other things you want me to demonstrate, feel free to make a comment. And if you like this video or this video series and you want to see more of what I do, please subscribe and check out my other videos. Thanks. All right. Thanks again for listening, watching, and as I said, leave a comment if you want to hear more. This is the Korg Minilogue Polyphonic Analog Synthesizer.